kid's kidneys going to shut down on our way out of Gunchester? The Faraday house in East Stockport is a shithole. 3 houses knocked into one, rotten floorboards under scraps of carpet. Where the door frames were, you can see layers of chicken wire jutting from the plasterwork. All the usual hawkers and hustlers, freelance tech bros, peddlers of chemicals and procurers of more personal services are here. We're the only guests today, but we've been through here enough times that the usual suspects know better than to shake down my people. Along with my crew, I lay out my hardware on a square of tarp, rebooting each unit into safe mode, patching what I can, hoping that I won't need to patch what I can't. This is easier for me than for other surgicals, because none of my kit is networked, except my wrist pad, Natch, but that's encrypted with a 1024-bit key, held only in wee Jenny's cupboard of wonders, somewhere in the Highlands of the Scots Republic, and nothing passes through that firewall without me asking it to. No such luck for most of my crew, who are all plantheads of one sort or another. The Kid and Harry satchels with their dated diver rigs, Namai's industrial stent roads and interfaces, Nick by name and her real-time physics engines and strategy modules. The one thing their plants all have in common is that they're illegal, obsolete, obscure, or a mix of all three. They weren't when first fitted, Natch. When plants first arrived on the scene, employers were competing for subjects to install them in. 10 years later, once the crude, error-prone and invasive plants were superseded by scan webs, you could just slip on and off like a hat. They were competing for liability lawyers to avoid having to clean up their mess. The result was a whole lot of folk with a head full of proprietary tech they couldn't, or wouldn't, get rid of, nor use for legitimate work. Over the years I found a fraction of those folk, gathered them together. I found work for them. For us. They're pleased to be transiting out of Gunchester, though. We've lost 1/5 of our salvage to customs. The Red Rose Federation is signatory to countless legacy trade agreements, meaning a lot of public domain intellectual property, hardware or software, gets flagged as stolen or pirated as soon as it identifies itself to the municipal network. And while salvage isn't considered theft in every jurisdiction, and while we may have been on UN business that came with salvage permits, Gunchester don't care. It's tollgate robbery in a way, but it's the cost of doing business, so we suck it up like everyone else. Even if your hardware doesn't decide to grass you up to a city full of greedheads, borders present other problems. Expired licenses, forced OS upgrades, even local viral variants your firewalls don't know. Hence the rituals of the Faraday house. The hand-annotated hard copy lists of recent exceptions and hardware seizures taped to the walls, the change and mark grifters stinking of hydroponic tobacco and stale sweat. I finished my ablutions first, as usual, and barter for half a reefer from a toothy old rasta crouched in a corner. Old Swampy joins me at the window to share it. I take a quick head count. Everyone looks good to go, but for the kid, stalled halfway through his strip down, knelt amongst his weapons and modules, staring up into interface space like he can see God in there. An angry God at that. "You all right, kid?" asked Harry, wrapping up in his own strip down. "Not let your insurance lapse again, have you?" "Not as such," says an unusually subdued kid, sliding out of eye space. The kid's original kidneys crapped out when he was 12 or so. I don't recall exactly why, but given his namesake, it's not hard to guess. While he's all tubed up to a dialysis machine, 2 suits arrive and tell his parents they can give him new experimental artificial kidneys, and no, don't worry about the cost. We understand. All you need to do is sign on your son's behalf, and we'll let him pay it off over the course of his whole lifetime. Hell, we'll even arrange jobs for him to make it easier. I never had kids myself, but it doesn't take high empathy stats to understand why the poor bastard signed him up. The kid himself admits it gave him his childhood back. He was lucky, in that he got an experimental model that actually worked as designed. He got lucky later too. Once he hit his economic majority at 16, his benefactor sent him to Hinckley, remediation work in the exclusion zone around Osborne's Folly, but the UN grants for the Hinckley clean-up ran out after a few years, by which time said benefactors has ceased to exist as a legal entity. The kid couldn't trace them. At any rate, they never got in touch again, so he thanked his luckies, signed up for a new career and more plants, as a data diver and forgot all about it. Only now his renal system has been flagged as lacking a site licence for the software it's running, and the OS is demanding that the kid return immediately to a certified repair services provider before the gratis 48-hour introductory offer expires, and the kid with it. The company that made those kidneys hasn't existed for a decade. Hell knows who acquired the IP on them. Some robo-lawyer operating out of the upper eastern seaboard states, probably. Doesn't make much difference. I know immediately what I have to do. How I can save the kid. Know who can save him, rather. We need to get the kid to Sheffield, I tell them. There's people there who can maybe fix him. Namai shakes her head. Wrong season for crossing the mountains. There's not really a right season. Gunchester's a fine place to start from if you're heading south. I've been wanting to hit the Bristol fairs and trade our salvage. We've been up in the Lake District these last few months, working another UN contract, protecting autonomous agri-systems from the endless army of amphibious cropper drones that clamber out of the Irish Sea. North African kids based in southern Europe piloting Chinese hardware, probably convinced they're grinding out gold and kudos in some game world. Their real objective is to grab viable samples of the European biome to take back to what's left of the States. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Surveillance drones on fire off the shoulder of Scafell Pike. Oh, it's a proper war zone up there, even if the human cost happens hundreds of miles away. Tough work, but good pay by UN standards, plus salvage rights on each drone we decommission. A few bits and bobs, managed to fall off some damaged agri-tech too. The sort of stuff that's easily sold to specialists, so to speak. Hence my yen for the fairs of Summerland. But now we have a new destination. And heading east out of the Red Rose Federation is a different matter entirely. Passing people over the Pennines isn't easy these days. The lesser roads are overgrown, the Hope Valley line was bombed out years ago, and the canals are crawling with water militias who survive by squeezing communities downstream. And while the old Snake Pass Road is still solid enough for smallish vehicles, anything less than an APC is open invitation for the Brigante to canter down the sides of the cut, armed with stolen welding lasers, slice you out of the car and eat you like a corned beef from the tin. We need to go underground, very literally so. Everyone's finishing up their lock and load. The kid sat hunched on his tarp, all knees and elbows, like a drowned spider, his skin oddly yellow and glistening with sweat. I don't have long. No one dies on the job. No one ever has. Not in the surgicals. I round them up and move them out, my mouth running all the old war movie cliches, trying to play the game, live the story, to get the narrative moving. That's always been my problem, I guess. I like giving the orders, but I hate making the decisions. That's why the surgicals pick our contracts democratically these days, and why not every member does every mission. Well, every member but me and wee Jen. Can't stage a circus without a ringmaster and someone to wrangle the permits out of the council, after all. Having decisions forced on you isn't much fun either. I should have remembered that. Part of me does remember it, in fact. But it's not the part that gets shit done, and the kid needs that part in charge right now. So I'd put on the mask and I play it. The veterans are old enough to see through the frame. Like me, they grew up in a time where there was still assumed to be some sort of canonical reality, no matter how little anyone could agree on its nature. That there was a difference between marketing and entertainment, between truth and the stories we drape over its nudity. Namai knows everything, of course, as by necessity does wee Jen. And it was Swampy himself who put me in touch with a design collective who hammered out the original brand narrative for me, back when I was just starting. But to the younger ones, like the kid and Nick by nature, even Harry to some extent, the story of the surgical is just as true as the story of how their parents met, or how Silicon Valley faked the Mars landings. They take the first explanation they're offered, either because they want it to be true, or because they're worried it already is. To them, being in the surgicals is simply a better story than the one they were in before, not least because it's a story that slightly more people have heard of. And it's a chance to play a bigger role than washed-up casualty of socio-technical innovation third class. And to them, I'm Elaine Stainless, the med student roller derby rogue who somehow turned her losing team into a legendary crew of grey ops systems analysis, specialising in theatres of advanced context collapse. Some days I'm either Elaine Stainless to myself, but not today. I open the line to wee Jen as soon as we're out of the Faraday house and ask her to bring Uber-style-stuck GmbH out of the mothballs, a squeaky clean daughter company that we keep in ice for working with transnationals and pickier nation-states. One such client is EDF, the former French national energy company that bought up a great deal of the UK's privatised grid back in the day. Brexit and its continental blowback wiped out EDF in Europe and left it holding the baby in the former UK, the baby being, in this case, a mismatched bundle of under-maintained infrastructure scattered around the country. Among them is the old Woodhead rail tunnel. We leave the DNZ on a little solar trolley that rides the old rails south-east just in case anyone's paying attention. We alight at Middlewood, from where the ghost of an older line leads us north and then east, through fields and overgrown ghost suburbs towards the western foothills of the Pennines. The tunnel mouth at the Woodhead end is all but obscured by a well-fortified compound, monofill fencing, razor-tape concertina, robo-turrets, the full Monty. The tunnel is very valuable still, despite the high-voltage cables running through it having not carried a current in years. Both of the Roses like to keep things local and won't share or trade energy with other Roses as a matter of principle, which, if nothing else, means there's always plenty of easy pick-up work for a crew like ours on both sides of the Pennines. But the Cold War of the Roses amplifies the Woodhead Tunnel's other offer, an inviolable infrastructural beachhead in both federations, and the ability to send personnel and materials from one side to the other. The North's answer to the Eurotunnel, as the old joke used to go, though people stopped telling that one after Kentish separatists brought down the roof on a few thousand indentured refugees from Greece. Uberstal's credentials get us into the killing zone between the compound's outer and inner fences. 3 bored-looking techs and a security goon with meth-head eyes emerge from the gateway module, buttoning up EDF coveralls over thick wool jumpers, breath steaming in the floodlit chill. Contractors, eh? The 3-striped tech is a scouser. She makes theatre out of consulting her wrist pad, while the 6 of us surgicals do our best not to look like we're having our bluff called. Nothing in my schedule, love. I'm guessing it's some sort of emergency, eh? Call from HQ on the White Road size, is it? Something gone wrong near the Woodhead end again? Something like that, I allow, as non-committally as possible. If she wants to do the work of fabricating the story, I might as well let her. It's a risk, but a calculated one. Priority sank, though, so it's all need to know, you know. Yeah, right. Hours not to reason why, eh? But it's the curse of this particular brigade to be a bit light on the old per diems, like. Don't suppose HR sent out that overtime we're owed, did they? Crunch time. I activate a pay-the-bearer draft of the Uberstall company seal, fill it out to the tune of what I imagine 3 Stripes' monthly take-home must be, and near-field it to her. This should explain HR's position thoroughly, I say. The EDF peeps have a little head-to-head in the drizzle. The huddle breaks, the heavy heads back towards the gate module, followed by one of the lesser techs. "All right, love," says 3-Stripe. "Our Adel back there, he's just found a problem with the cam network in the tunnels, see. Take him a good few hours to fix it, he reckons. Maybe right through till morning, but so long as you don't mind working without the guaranteed security that EDF's surveillance systems normally provide to visiting contractors, maybe we could just let you get on with your job." Glances at the kid. Looks back at me. "Priorité 5, oui?" "Vraiment," I say, trying not to sound too relieved. Someone has to keep up the pretense, right? "We'll get out of your way, then." "Looks like you'd better," she agrees. Listens for a moment. Distracted. "Yeah, them cams are definitely down. We'll keep 'em that way until morning." She grins. It takes 10 years off an already young face. "Now, piss off before we all get in trouble, all right?" The tunnel mouth is blocked with a thick steel plate, tarnished and pitted by the Pennine weather. Let into its centre there's a door large enough for a freight wagon, where 24 metres of rails and sleepers protrude from the tunnel mouth like a rolled-out tongue. Mines of Moria, mutters Swampy. Something's got him spooked. I'll need to get him straightened out once we're inside. "How does that one go?" pipes up the kid, revived, however briefly, by the prospect of a story he doesn't know, or doesn't remember. "Don't ask," I say, raising the company seal to the authentication plate. A muffled thunk, a buzz, a scrape of metal on metal. "Speak, friend," and enter. The door opens. Beneath and between the echoing booms of gunfire, I can hear someone chanting, "Shit, shit, shit, shit." I realise that's me. My throat hurts. The air smells of cordite and rain, and there's vomit on the toe of my right boot. I'm holding my Fletcher. I look up again. 10 yards ahead of the tunnel mouth where I'm crouching, Harry's hunkered down behind the bulk of an old freight bogie, ducking out every few seconds to send a couple of rounds into the thicket sheltering our assailants, who plainly don't have the firepower to do much more than they already have, and just as plainly aren't going to retreat. "Hold, twist, or fold!" shouts Harry. We don't have time to hold them, and there's too few of us to try for a tactical twist that might scare him into a rout. I glance over at Namai. She nods once, closes her eyes. I look over at Swampy, his life pooling red in the mud beneath him. "Fold," I call back. They started it, I tell myself, playground sing-song in my head. Harry crouches low, rummages in his pouches, brings out something that fits in his fist, twists it, lobs it at the thicket. There's a bright flash, a loud crack, followed immediately by utter silence. For a few moments all is motionless, but for the drizzle and falling leaves sparkling in the sunlight, and my kick drum heart thumping hard in the cavern of my chest. Swampy had done such a good job of keeping his shit together in the tunnel that I let him out ahead while the rest of us finish our strip-downs in the Faraday room at the end of the tunnel. It all looked clear on the cams, so I figured it'd be fine. Never much bandit trouble on the Sawyer side, if only because nobody's got out worth stealing. He doesn't need long in the Faradays anyway. His plants weren't networked by design. See, Swampy was a Johnny for an academic activist group known as the Prussian Forestry Commission during the Brexit years. He smuggled proprietary data and paywalled papers both ways across the border with Europe, stashed on an encrypted SSD drilled into the bone of his brain pan. The border force caught him by accident as he returned from a conference in Amsterdam, turned him over to GCHQ's wetware specialists. The SSD was locked up tighter than an offshore bank, but they used generic parts and shareware to build the crude visual user interface he needed to shunt stuff in and out of it, and this left open a high bandwidth pipe directly into the visual cortex of Swampy's brain, down which the data spooks poured, in Swampy's own words, every wonderful, horrible thing that ever was. His will never cracked, and nor did the crypto, but his mind's been a shattered mirror ever since. They never made a charge stick, but the media coverage ensured he'd never work in the academy again. So now he rolls with me. With us. He's plain useless a lot of the time, and an outright liability in a firefight, but he's got copies of everything he ever smuggled, and a whole lot more still stashed upstairs, and he's saved the company's bacon more than once before. And now he's bleeding out on a damp April morning. I slowly become aware of sound again, behind me. The kid's ragged sobbing, wee Jenny squawking from a wrist pad, asking what's happened. Ahead of me, Harry Satchel's reciting every bad word he knows as he crawls towards the heap of tie-dye and military surplus that used to be Swampy. I hadn't counted on a scavenger crew camping the tunnel mouth like the respawn point in a poorly designed strategy game. I wonder, with a horrible, detached clarity, whether there was some clue I missed in what the three-stripe had said, whether she tried to warn us, or knowingly sent us into an ambush. I watch Namai stripping the scavengers while Harry shovels out a shallow grave. Their corpses are gaunt, with the pinched rack-like features of poverty and malnutrition, even their weapons are junk for God's sake. The round that hit Swampy came out of an old tutu, so rusty it's a wonder it didn't blow up in its owner's face. But it didn't. So we killed him. I killed him. And at this point, I figure my karma hasn't got far left to run. I help Namai rig stretchers from bundles of carbon rebar, cable ties and the ragged tents from the scavers camp. Her face stoic, her cheeks wet. She gently zips Swampy's body to a stretcher, while the kid tries to argue that it's no problem. He's fine to walk all the way to Rust City. Funny how they're corpses, if you didn't know them, but bodies if you did. I walk over to the kid and give his shoulder a gentle shove. He goes down like a crane in a gale. You can barely stand, let alone walk, I snap. Lay down, kid. Okay, boss, he whispers. Those whipped puppy eyes, sure, but at the same time the supplication to the role. The comfort of knowing his place in the tale. Of thinking I know mine. I walk away a bit, face east, and look out over God's own country. Tim. The White Rose Federation stretches away from my feet to the North Sea coast, or whatever's left of it. I try to think about the route ahead, make plans, but it all feels inevitable now. The threads are all tugging in one direction. We reach the checkpoint at Penistone, and there's a long line. Rural fringers heading out into the Socialist Republic of South Yorkshire to trade whatever they can breed, grow, make or find out in the foothills. With typical Soyo reticence, no one passes more than pleasantries with the barely disguised mercenary crew carrying a corpse, and soon to be corpse, on jerry-built stretchers, and it's all I can do not to scream at them, yes, that's one dead, and one dying, and it's all my bloody fault, and can't you just for a change lay the sacred institution of queuing aside and let us through? But merc work is technically illegal in Soyo, so we pretend along that there's nothing to see here, just some humble farmsteaders carrying 2 sick friends and the sort of tools that are no use for digging ditches, see there? And finally we're in front of the border guard himself. White rose regalia stitched badly onto a military greatcoat twice as old as I am, whose job frees him from the burden of polite fictions. He glances at the Uberstall seal, shrugs. Don't mean no around here, Duck. Them of you with ARFIDs should present him. Them of you without will have to go through certification. I'm forced to fold back on older credentials. I look at my feet, exposing my neck. A beep from the border guard's scanner. Ah, right. Elaine halfway. You've citizenship, system says. Aye, I reply. I've not heard that surname in a long time. Can I vouch for the unchipped? You can that. Means you take responsibility for him, though. I look back at Swampy, at the kid, panting like a dog with sunstroke. Aye, I say. I do that. I thumb the forms. The guard waves us through. 20 minutes being prodded and observed in customs. By the time we're out, wee Jenny's booked us in a livestock truck for the ride down the line to Sheffield, and I've made a voice call I planned never to make. We ride the rails in silence. At New Victoria Station, I bundle Namai and the kid into a pedal taxi. Aren't you coming? She asks. Best if I don't. He's all checked in. It's all arranged. I'll come and find you both tomorrow morning. Tim will fix him up. I promise. What about you? I'll be fine. Hometown, remember? Now, go. She goes, grudgingly. The crew disperse to find lodgings of their own. I find a cheap room just off the wicker, lay down and stare up at the map of stains on the ceiling, looking for a route out. I consider leaving, rehearse it in my mind, see myself boarding the early milk train for Hull, maybe taking sail for the new Hanseatic. Instead I go outside, bundled against the wind from the east. I wander the streets of my past, waiting for one more dawn. Next day, morning. What was once Royal Hallamshire Hospital. More memories, but I'm too tired to manage them. The crew's all here. Dr. Tim's telling the kid the score regarding his renals. You'll never get full function, I'm afraid. 70% optimal for your demographic, maybe. If you're a drinker, you're not anymore. Firm but gentle, Tim lent his bedside from doctors who fled the collapse of the NHS. We dropped in a generic firmware, but we can't do anything about the Mac, so keep them off your uplink bus permanently. The licensee can flash a new firmware remotely, and a new license might not leave you time to cross the mountains and let your boss beg a favour. The kid slurs a fulsome thanks to Tim, loved up on morphine and the prospect of more life to come. I'm glad that you and Elaine are friends, Tim. So glad. We're not friends, Tim replies. Here it comes. We were colleagues once. The surgicals! The kid beams a bright light against the black hole yawning open inside my chest. He's always loved the story. Loves any story. They're all the same to him. You skated together, right? In the Brexit years? Tim just looks up. Straight at me. A look he gave me once before. We're so close to the end now. I'm so close. Almost as close as I was to Tim. No. We never skated together. That's just a story your boss made up. Her brand narrative, if you like. The Sheffield Surgicals, former medical student roller derby stars turned techno-running adventurers after the balkanisation of the health sector. But most of the originals quit, of course, or died. No one remembers the old days apart from her, do they? Because none of you were there. He's still looking straight at me, and I'm looking back, but I don't know what my face is saying. I want him to stop there, but I want him to finish it too. And he does. Looks around at all the others, then back at me. So none of you know it's all lies, he says. The kid's face folds up in pantomime sorrow. Every story needs a little bit of fiction, he starts. Tim snaps, and something inside me snaps at the same time. The last thread holding the mask on, maybe. Sheffield Surgicals was never a bloody roller derby team, okay? It was a private medical research start-up. The NHS folded halfway through our training, so most of us took private sector work. Frontline care, palliative, subscription A&E. There was a little research going, and what there was dodgy. But ambition doesn't care much for dodginess, does it? Some of it's true, I hear myself saying. I did play roller derby. No, hang on a minute, says the kid. She quit a course when the NHS folded. And then spent 3 years project managing a manufacturer interface implant that left its volunteer subjects with permanent psychotic dysmorphia. Rest of their lives locked in their own heads, utterly convinced that their body is actually an SMT pick-and-place machine, or hell knows what else. She had the grace to confess at the inquest, at least. I'll give her that. But don't fall for the rest of it. Elaine Stainless doesn't exist. The Sheffield Surgicals have never been anything but a way for defrocked medical researchers to pretend she never screwed up. It may look like a business to you, but really it's a sop to her guilt. It's all true. I don't need to hear it again. I walk out of the ward as Tim tells the rest of it, out into the street. The endorsement the company put on my public profile was the best reference a medtech student could dream of, and ensured I'd never work in legitimate medicine again for as long as I lived. That was the end of Elaine halfway. Elaine Stainless took her place a little later, after my old Derby team folded, leaving me lumbered with the continuity accounts of one failed business and control over the registered domains and brand identity of another. I put 2 and 2 together and convinced everyone they saw her for. And this is the end of Elaine Stainless, it seems. I thought I was helping those I'd harmed before. Somehow, that I was making amends. I still think that now, if I'm honest, it's not like there's anything else I can do. Your backstory always gets you in the end. I can't let it end there, though. Not like this. This isn't just my story, after all. One by one, my crew come out in silence and join me on the wall outside the hospital. All but the kid, of course. I'm sorry, I tell them. Beside me, Namai shrugs. We all knew anyway. She takes my hand in hers. Even the kid? I ask. Well, no, but he's over the moon right now. He just got to be part of the denouement of a 20-year story. Keeps asking Tim to find him an agent. I smile. The expression feels like it doesn't belong on my face. Like a poorly fitted dust mask. Maybe we should all find one, I say. Or maybe, just for once, I should wait for someone to find me first.